So Steve was teaching the customer development model, and one of his students augmented it. One of his students had a bigger idea. I think I had a great idea out of that good idea. His name was Eric Ries, and he codified those ideas into a book. Highly advise it. It's called The Lean Startup. When you're done reading this book, done watching these lectures, go get a copy of that book. Read it cover to cover. I'm only going to cover 2 of the ideas in that book. First idea is that startups are not smaller versions of big companies. Startups are different. Startups have one purpose, and that is to find something of value to bring to customers, right? To find it as opposed to execute and do it. So if you look at a big company, they already know what customers want. They already have customers. Their job is to execute and operate and bring more of that to more customers. A startup's job is to find that validated plan, that validated product or service that people will buy, starting from nothing, starting from 0 customers. And most startups fail. Again, echoing the words we heard before, most startups fail because they bring the wrong product or service and therefore don't find enough customers to keep themselves going. So Eric's big idea was to use the scientific method to help solve this problem. And the scientific method is come up with a hypothesis, come up with a test to test that hypothesis, learn from that test, and do it again. And in doing this, Eric says there are 2 hypotheses that are true for every startup. One is the value hypothesis. That is simply saying what I'm doing has value to someone. And the growth hypothesis, which is there are enough people out there with this problem that will pay for it that I can build a business around it. So again, I'll repeat this one more time. There's 2 questions you have to answer in each startup. One, is what I'm doing valuable to a customer? Will they pay for it? And if so, are there enough of those customers to build a business around it? So let's focus on the first one and figure out how you do that. Eric's big idea was to shorten Steve's customer development model. What Eric said is get something out into the market as soon as possible so that when you're out talking to potential customers, it's not theory. You're not asking them, would you buy this or would you take this if it existed? You were asking them to buy something right now. And so in order to do that, you have to have what he calls the minimal viable product. The absolute smallest, minimal, set of features and functions and whatnot, and viable as in someone will buy it. Bring that to market. And so you may have a bigger vision. You probably have a bigger vision of something you need to build, and it may take you 12 or 18 or 24 or 36 months to build that. That's great. But in order to know that that is something that someone will buy, you have to start with something smaller. You have to start with your MVP. So let me give you a couple of examples on what this looks like. So from the book, The Lean Startup, there's a few great examples, starting with Groupon. Now, you may be familiar with Groupon, fastest growing company from $0 to $500 million ever in the history of mankind. And you may recognize Groupon as this online service where there's a website and a lot of email and group buying and what looks like a lot of technology behind the scenes. And there is today. But when Groupon got started, it got started with a hand-built blog. Some person sat down with WordPress, which is a free system for making blogs, and created the opportunities, created those deals by hand one at a time. And that buy button just went off to a database that was sitting in the background, an off-the-shelf database, and just logged who had some interest in the deal. Once they had enough interest, by hand, they then spit out some PDFs. The database was configured so it could spit out a file in the form of a PDF that was the deal that could be purchased. And then by hand, they emailed those to customers. So just to be clear, they built the technology to do this out of some off-the-shelf parts with a lot of manual labor. And that was their MVP. And they proved out their business by going to the pizzeria that was already in their building downstairs and selling enough coupons for 50% off the pizzas that they thought they were onto something. Right? They spent basically No money. They spent hundreds of dollars to prove out their model. And they proved it out with dozens or hundreds of people, not thousands or millions of people. Right? Same thing's true of Zappos. So Zappos, if you don't know the company, they sell shoes online. They were purchased by Amazon for $1 billion. Right? We'll call that a success. Zappos was one of the first companies to sell shoes online, and what they didn't know was whether anyone would ever buy shoes online. Think about the process. Think about the experience you have in going to a shoe store to buy shoes. You try on a lot of pairs before you pick one. So unlike buying books online, you have to have a mechanism for sending the shoes back. You don't send the books back after you've read them. So Tony, the founder of Zappos, he wanted to do this as quickly and cheaply as possible. So he did not build an automated warehouse. He did not buy any shoes, in fact. What he did was he went to his neighborhood shoe stores. He took his camera with him, and he went to the owners of the shoe stores and struck a deal. He said, "Can I take a picture of the shoes that you have in stock? I'm going to put them on a website, and if I sell them, can I come to the store and buy them and ship them out?" And if you ask any shopkeeper that deal, they'll say yes. And my guess, I don't know for sure, but my guess is Tony never even asked for a discount. He didn't ask for 10% off to do this, because that's not the point. The point wasn't to make money. The point was simply to prove that someone would buy shoes online. So his cost to get this started was a camera and a website. Right? Again, hundreds of dollars to prove this or disprove this theory, and it proved out. And then he could go on to buy shoes wholesale and make money and so forth. One more from the book is the Village Laundry Service. So you don't have to be an online service to have an MVP. This was a company in India that wanted to disrupt and change the way clothes are washed in India. And the traditional way clothes are washed is that you hand your clothes in a bag to a washerwoman, and she takes it away to a stream or a lake or somewhere, and 48 hours later brings back your washed clean clothes, which have been washed by hand. So Village Laundry said, well, look, there's been a machine around for 100 years that can wash clothes for us. Why don't we take those machines, put them on the back of a pickup truck with a generator, a tank of water, and so forth. We'll drive them out to a village, and we will promise to give back their clothes in 24 hours. So they bought one of those ubiquitous white Toyota pickup trucks you see in the developing world. They bought a washing machine. They bought a generator. They went out to a village just outside Bangalore, so they didn't have to go too far outside developed part of India. And they started selling their service. What they learned was that customers did not trust that their clothes would come back because they were handing them to a company that had a truck. And I don't know why that's true. I don't understand why that's true, but that's what is true. That the fact that the machine was sitting on a truck with wheels and could drive away, customers didn't like that. And they didn't know, you'd never learn that with any other interview process or whatnot. All right, it'd be much, much harder to learn that. So what did this company do? Well, they took the machine off the truck and put it in basically a kiosk, and then the customers were perfectly happy. The truck could be sitting there, but it wasn't sitting on a truck, and they learned that from being in the market. And they learned it really quickly. Now, in those three examples, the MVP, the minimal viable product, was a scaled-down version of the full-scale service or the full-scale product. It doesn't have to be that way. Remember, the reason the MVP exists, the purpose is to prove the value hypothesis. You want to know that someone will buy what you're selling. And so it doesn't necessarily have to be exactly what you're selling. For example, Dropbox. Now, you've probably heard of this company, and odds are you actually use their service. They're only a few years old. They've come out of nowhere. Right? They're worth billions of dollars now in terms of value of their company. So they jumped into a business accelerator called Y Combinator, which is a 12-week-long program. And the expectations of that program is that by the time you're done, 12 weeks later, you have a product that someone can buy. Or at least you have validated your business plan, so you're an investable company. The guys at Dropbox, they said, there's no way we can build what we want in 12 weeks. There's no way we can have an up and running system that truly proves out what we're doing in 12 weeks. So we're going to go a different direction. Rather than write any code whatsoever, we're going to focus on a video. And so what they did was they built a 4-minute video, how the system would work if it had been built. They put it up on a single-page website. And then they spent the rest of the time marketing that website as broadly as possible to understand the customers. And by the time they were done with 12 weeks, they had 30,000 email addresses of people who wanted to sign up. Now, that's not money. They were not asking for any money. It's a freemium product, so it's free to use for a certain amount of size, and then some small percentage of their customer base pays them. But 30,000 people said they wanted to try out this product. With that market validation, they were able to walk into an investor and say, we have something here. We have something big here. And they got funded, and now again, they're worth $4 or $5 billion. Similarly, there's a company in Seattle called Arrow. Arrow had a pretty big idea. They wanted to buy some of these airplanes, as shown here, and fly them between the local airport in downtown Seattle and the local airport in downtown San Jose, right? So there's a lot of companies that have offices in both Seattle and the Bay Area, and they wanted to be a charter service or something like a charter service that would be much quicker between those two destinations. And they started with that city pair because there are, again, Facebook and Twitter and Google and Yahoo and a lot of other big companies have offices in both cities. They figured it would be a good city pair. And they had a slightly different business model than we've seen before in airlines. They wanted a subscription service. They wanted companies to pay $500 a month for the right to buy airline tickets on this airplane, right? Haven't seen that before. And so rather than buy the airplane and then market it and see if anyone will come and buy it, what you see here on this airplane is Photoshop. That is an airplane, but it doesn't have this paint scheme. At least it didn't when they came up with this model. What they did instead was to make a website that described why this service was better than flying coach or flying business class, and how the model worked, and allowed companies to sign up and subscribe and be early subscribers to this service. And they got some press around this, and within a few months, or actually within a few days of getting press on this, they were oversubscribed. Within a few days of having the website done and having some press about it, they knew that one airplane was not going to be enough, that they needed at least 2 airplanes. But most importantly, what they learned was that their subscription model was flawed, that it wasn't going to work the way they wanted to, because almost every company that signed up wanted Mondays and Fridays. They had employees that commute between the 2 cities, and they wanted to be able to fly up on Monday and down on Friday or vice versa. And because their model was subscribe and fly anytime, it didn't leave enough seats for the companies that didn't have commuters. If I wanted to fly on Mondays and Wednesdays, I could not fly down on Mondays. So they found this out by building a website, getting some press, and getting customers to pre-buy, to basically subscribe to a service that didn't actually exist. Okay, that's how you do an MVP. And we'll ask you in a moment to figure out your own MVP. But before we get there, just understand that that's just the first step in this process, that you're supposed to use the scientific method for everything going forward as well. So whatever you learn from your MVP, you take that knowledge, you then make a hypothesis on how to change it and make it better, and you put that in the market. And you then learn from that, and you make more changes, and you put that in the market. And you iterate this over and over again as quickly as you can. So again, if we step back to Steve's model, he said the flaw was that it was 12 or 18 or 24 months before you learned anything from the market and could make changes. That's just too long. Life moves much too fast these days to wait 12 months to make changes. We see this best embodied in the internet companies. If you're unaware, Facebook, unless they're going quicker now, launches a new product every Tuesday. That doesn't mean that everything on Facebook changes every Tuesday. It means something in the Facebook system changes on Tuesday. They don't launch on Wednesdays or Thursdays or Fridays, just Tuesdays. And when they announced this, which was a few years ago, the folks from Amazon in the room giggled and said, yeah, but we launch something every 6 seconds. Something within the large amount of software that runs the Amazon system gets updated multiple times per day. And the same thing's true for Google and a bunch of the other companies as well. And so just to step back to the Facebook model here, what this means is that there are 50 opportunities per year for Facebook to try something with customers, learn from that, make changes, make things better. And not every one of those changes will be positive. Many of those changes will fail. Many of those changes will be for the worse. But the key is that they can make these changes and make these hypotheses out for what could make their service better and learn from them really quickly. And if they don't work, fine, turn them off next Tuesday. And they can do this 50 times a year. And perhaps what went wrong with MySpace, I don't know for sure, but perhaps they were only making quarterly changes. Maybe they were only making 4 changes a year. And so if you imagine how much more you know about your customers if you talk to them 50 times a year versus 4, versus 2, versus 1, versus every other year. So the quicker you can go through this cycle, the better your chances of success, because you will be better attuned to what your customers actually want.